They weren't found in tombs. They weren't honored with ceremonies or laid to rest by their loved ones. They were discovered in the twisted postures of their final agonizing moments. A family huddled in a room, a man shielding his face on a public stairway, their bones left untouched in the streets for over 4,000 years. They are the silent witnesses to a day when one of humanity's greatest cities simply died instantly. This was Mohenjo Daro, the jewel of the ancient Indus Valley civilization. Not a primitive settlement, but a sprawling metropolis that rivaled the grandeur of Egypt and Mesopotamia. A city of breathtaking sophistication, engineered with a level of precision that would not be seen again for millennia. Its architects laid out streets in a perfect grid, a feat of urban planning that modern cities still emulate. Beneath these streets ran the world's first known sanitation system, with complex brick-lined drains, private wells, and indoor bathrooms in nearly every home. At its heart stood the Great Bath, a colossal waterproof structure whose purpose remains a profound mystery, a testament to a people who mastered hydraulics and monumental architecture before the first stones of the Parthenon were ever laid. For centuries, this city thrived. Its people were traders, artisans, and engineers. They developed their own system of writing, a script we have yet to decipher, sealing their deepest secrets from our understanding. They built a society of order and apparent equality, with no evidence of lavish palaces for kings or grandiose temples for gods. It was a civilization built on logic, on water, on trade. And then, around 1900 BCE, it vanished. Not slowly, not with the gentle decay of time, but with the brutal finality of a slammed door. When archaeologists unearthed its ruins from beneath the Pakistani sands in the 1920s, they weren't just discovering a lost city, they were uncovering a crime scene. A scene of mass death on an unimaginable scale, frozen in a single horrifying instant. The name, Mohenjo Daro, is a modern one given by locals. It means the Mound of the Dead, a name that proved to be terrifyingly literal. But what truly baffled the excavators was the lack of a clear cause. There were no layers of silt to suggest a catastrophic flood, no widespread evidence of swords or arrowheads to indicate a brutal invasion. The skeletons bore no marks of violence. It was as if a silent, invisible wave of death had swept through the meticulously planned streets, killing people where they stood, leaving them where they fell. The conventional theories of history, war, famine, plague, climate change, all seemed to fail here. They couldn't explain the sheer suddenness, the chilling tableaus of ordinary life cut short. What kind of power can erase a city of 40,000 people in a flash? A power that leaves bodies in the streets, but no army to claim victory. The deeper the investigators dug, the more disturbing the evidence became, pointing not to a human enemy or a natural disaster, but to something far stranger, something that left a terrifying signature on the very earth itself. In a 45-meter-wide circle near the city's heart, the very ground tells a story of impossible energy. Here, the clay pottery, the foundation stones, and the bricks of the buildings are not merely broken, they are fused together, melted into a solid, glass-like substance. It's a phenomenon called vitrification, and it requires temperatures of at least 1,500 degrees Celsius, a heat intense enough to liquefy stone. A citywide fire, no matter how catastrophic, cannot do this. An ancient kiln, burning at its absolute peak, cannot do this. This was not the slow heat of a fire. This was the flash heat of a furnace, blasted across a wide epicenter with unimaginable force. And it was here, within this circle of glass, that the most disturbing discovery of all was made. In the 1970s, researchers like the British Indian author David Davenport, building on earlier Soviet studies, brought a Geiger counter to the Mound of the Dead. What they reported sent shockwaves through the fringes of archaeology. The skeletons, particularly those found sprawled in the streets, were found to be emitting inexplicable levels of radiation. In fact, one skeleton was reported to contain a level of radioactivity nearly 50 times greater than normal background levels. These were not the remains of people who had simply died. They were the irradiated husks of a populace caught in a blast zone, chillingly similar to the victims found in Hiroshima and Nagasaki thousands of years later. The city wasn't just a tomb, it was a hot zone. This terrifying physical evidence, vitrified stone and radioactive remains, led investigators to look for answers in the one place they had never dared to look before: ancient mythology. They turned to the Mahabharata, the epic Sanskrit poem of ancient India. Within its pages lies a horrifyingly precise description of a divine weapon, the Brahmastra. The texts speak of a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe, creating an incandescent column of smoke and flame, as bright as 10,000 suns. Its deployment caused the winds to scream, the earth to shake, and the elephants to run in terror from the heat. The scriptures describe warriors' hair and nails falling out, pottery breaking without apparent cause, and the food becoming poisoned. For years afterward, the land would be barren, and the rivers would run toxic. It was a description of unparalleled destruction, long dismissed as poetic hyperbole, the stuff of myth and legend. But standing in the ruins of Mohenjo Daro, surrounded by melted rock and radioactive remains, one has to ask a chilling question. What if it wasn't a myth? The details align with the precision of a modern scientific report on nuclear fallout. The evidence on the ground, the radiation in the bones, and the ancient verses all seem to point toward an impossible conclusion, an atomic-level catastrophe. But if this wasn't a natural event, who or what possessed the power to unleash such a weapon 4,000 years ago? The horrifying answer may be hiding in plain sight, etched into the same ancient texts that described the blast. The Mahabharata doesn't just speak of a weapon, it speaks of who wielded it: gods, heroes, and kings waging war from flying machines called Vimanas. These weren't simple chariots. Ancient Sanskrit literature, from the epics to disputed texts like the Vaimanika Shastra, describes them in painstaking detail as sophisticated aerial craft. They were said to move faster than thought, to maneuver in the sky, to travel great distances, and even to become invisible. Some accounts describe them as being powered by a strange mercury-based vortex engine capable of generating immense lift and power. More disturbingly, these Vimanas were not just for transport. They were weaponized platforms capable of deploying the very celestial fire that the epics describe with such terror. For decades, these accounts were dismissed as the fantasies of a primitive people. But when confronted with the vitrified ruins of Mohenjo Daro, this dismissal feels almost arrogant. Does a myth explain radioactive skeletons better than our own accepted history? For a long time, the leading theory was that of an Aryan invasion. Scholars proposed that nomadic tribes swept down from the north, conquering the peaceful Indus Valley people. But the evidence on the ground simply refuses to support this. There are no signs of a pitched battle, no layers of ash from a city put to the torch, no weapon-filled graves of fallen soldiers. Archaeologists found only a few dozen skeletons scattered across a vast city, a number too small for a full-scale invasion. And their bones show no signs of sword marks or battle wounds. They died not as warriors, but as victims. Other historians have proposed a more mundane killer: nature itself. They argue that a catastrophic flood or a sudden shift in the course of the mighty Indus River could have doomed the city, choking its agriculture and forcing its people to flee. This theory is plausible for the gradual decline of the wider Indus Valley civilization, but it utterly fails to explain the scene at Mohenjo Daro. A flood does not melt stone. A river changing course does not irradiate human bone. Climate change, however severe, cannot account for an epicenter of vitrified brick, a clear ground zero where an unimaginable energy was unleashed from a single point. These theories feel like attempts to rationalize the unthinkable, to fit a terrifying anomaly into a safe, conventional box. If the established narratives of invasion and natural disaster are just stories we tell ourselves to avoid an uncomfortable truth, what are we left with? We are left with the evidence itself, the radioactive bodies of men, women, and children caught in the open as if struck by something from above. We are left with the physical proof of a heat that rivals the sun. We are left with ancient scriptures that read less like mythology and more like the eyewitness accounts of a technological war. But a war requires more than one side. If Mohenjo Daro was the target, who was the enemy? And is there any other evidence, anywhere else on Earth, of such an impossible ancient conflict? The chilling answer is yes. The vitrified ruins of Mohenjo Daro are not an anomaly. They are one piece of a terrifying global puzzle, a pattern of unexplained destruction stretching from the highlands of Europe to the deserts of the Middle East. If we dare to look, the footprints of this forgotten fire are scattered all across our world. Travel to Scotland, and you will find the remains of over 100 ancient hill forts. But these are no ordinary ruins. Their stone walls have been subjected to a heat so intense that the rock has bubbled, melted, and fused into solid, glassy slag. Mainstream archaeology struggles to explain them, suggesting massive timber-laced fires during sieges. But could such fires truly and consistently generate the thousands of degrees needed to vitrify entire fortresses? Or are we looking at the aftermath of a weapon that turned stone to glass, the same ghastly signature found halfway across the world in the Indus Valley? Venture south into the Great Sand Sea between Libya and Egypt. For thousands of square kilometers, the desert floor is littered with chunks of a mysterious, beautiful, and eerily pure yellow-green glass. This is Libyan desert glass, and its existence has baffled scientists for a century. To create such pure glass from sand requires a flash of thermal energy so immense it defies conventional explanation. The energy needed is comparable to the atmospheric detonation of a nuclear weapon, an event that instantly melts sand into glass, just as it did at the Trinity test site in New Mexico, creating a new mineral called trinitite. What happened over this desert thousands of years ago to unleash such atomic-level power? Now, consider the ancient city of Tal el-Hammam in the Jordan Valley, believed by many to be the historical basis for the biblical Sodom. Around 1650 BCE, this thriving metropolis was obliterated in an instant. Archaeologists have unearthed a shocking scene: pottery surfaces melted into glass, mud bricks boiled, and human skeletons so violently dismembered that they were clearly hit by a high-pressure shock wave. The scientific consensus points to a massive cosmic airburst, a meteor or comet exploding in the atmosphere with the force of 1,000 atomic bombs. It was an event of fire from the sky that annihilated a city. The parallels are undeniable. Whether it was a comet over Jordan or something else over Pakistan, the result was the same: a civilization erased by an unimaginable power from above. Vitrified forts in Scotland, a glass desert in Africa, a city in the Jordan Valley annihilated by an aerial blast. These are not just archaeological curiosities, they are scars on the face of the earth, scars that suggest a forgotten age of terrible power. But this only deepens the central mystery. If a war was fought with such weapons, it was a war between intelligences of the highest order. Was this a lost chapter of human history? A cycle of technological advancement and self-destruction we are doomed to repeat? Or were the combatants not human at all? If humanity did not possess this power, then we are forced to consider the unthinkable, that our planet was once a battlefield for visitors from another world. This isn't a fantasy novel. It is a theory born from the gaps in our own history, a theory that suggests the gods of our ancestors were not divine beings, but flesh and blood extraterrestrials with technology we are only now beginning to comprehend. Proponents of this idea, known as the ancient astronaut theory, argue that we should read our myths not as poetry, but as history. The angels and demons, the gods and titans, were visitors. The Vimanas were their spacecraft, and the celestial weapons, like the Brahmastra, were their technology of war. Viewed through this lens, the mystery of Mohenjo Daro transforms. Was this advanced, orderly city a human settlement allied with one extraterrestrial faction? Was it a colony, an outpost built by visitors in our distant past? This could explain its bizarre uniqueness, its incredible urban planning, its advanced sanitation, and its conspicuous lack of temples, palaces, or royal tombs. It was a society unlike any other on Earth at the time, perhaps because its architects weren't entirely of this Earth. Its destruction, then, was not an act of human aggression, but a single, brutal strike in a cosmic conflict fought in our skies, with our world as the unfortunate collateral. The idea seems unbelievable until you consider the words of the man who unlocked this terrible power for the modern age. In 1945, J. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, witnessed the first successful nuclear detonation in the New Mexico desert. As the mushroom cloud ascended, turning the sand below into glass, a line from an ancient Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, came to his mind. He would later recall, "I remembered the line, 'Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.'" It is a chillingly profound connection. Why would the creator of our era's ultimate weapon, in his moment of terrifying triumph, immediately and instinctively reach back thousands of years to a Sanskrit epic? Did Oppenheimer, a man who had studied these texts, suspect that he hadn't invented something entirely new, but had merely rediscovered a lost and terrible fire? This possibility changes everything. It suggests that human history is just a fragment of a much larger and more violent cosmic story. That the empty spaces in our past are not empty at all, but are filled with the echoes of a war so vast, it defies imagination. It means the beings our ancestors worshipped were not benevolent creators, but warring factions who brought their apocalypse to our doorstep. It is a breathtaking and terrifying theory. And while it may sound like fantasy, one final cryptic piece of evidence remains buried within the ruins of Mohenjo Daro, a discovery so strange, so out of place, that it defies both conventional history and even the wildest tales of gods and aliens, the final secret of the Mound of the Dead. The final secret of Mohenjo Daro is not a weapon. It is not a hidden chamber or a piece of impossible technology. It is a message, carved into a tiny soapstone seal less than 2 inches wide. Discovered in the city's ruins, the artifact known as the Pashupati seal contains the most enigmatic and controversial image ever recovered from the Indus Valley. It depicts a figure with 3 faces and a horned headdress, seated in a meditative yogic posture. This being is surrounded by the great animals of the region: a rhinoceros, a water buffalo, an elephant, and a tiger. Mainstream archaeology identifies this as a proto-Shiva, an early representation of a great Hindu god, a symbol of a forgotten religion. But in the shadow of atomic-level destruction, we must ask, is it a god, or is it a portrait? Is this a depiction of a human shaman wearing a ceremonial mask? Or is it the Indus people's hauntingly literal attempt to record the appearance of a non-human visitor, a three-faced being from another world, cataloging the fauna of a planet that was not its own? Is the horned headdress a crown of divinity, or is it the unfamiliar biology of an extraterrestrial? This single, silent image could be the key to everything, the Rosetta Stone of a lost cosmic history. But the final, agonizing piece of the puzzle is that we cannot read it. The seal, like hundreds of others, is covered in the elegant script of the Indus Valley civilization, a complex written language that remains completely undeciphered to this day. The answer is right in front of us, etched in stone, but its meaning is locked away, as silent as the bones in the street. In the end, we are left standing in the dust of a 4,000-year-old question mark. The vitrified rock, the radioactive skeletons, the myths of celestial battles, and the global scars of forgotten fire, they all point to a truth that is too large, too terrifying for our accepted version of history. Whether Mohenjo Daro was destroyed by a wrathful god, a cosmic impact, a lost human technology, or an alien war, the distinction almost ceases to matter. The outcome was the same: total, instantaneous annihilation. A city that mastered water and logic was erased by a power that defied both. We may never know for certain what happened on that final, terrible day. The theories, from the scientific to the fantastic, may circle the truth forever without ever landing. But the truth we can touch, the one that chills us to our core, lies with the skeletons. The family that died together, the man who never finished climbing the stairs. They are the true legacy of Mohenjo Daro. They are not a myth. They are a warning, a silent, 4,000-year-old testament to the existence of a power, be it divine, natural, or technological, that can extinguish a great civilization in a single blinding flash. The deepest horror is not that it happened to them, but the sudden, cold realization that in our modern world we have finally and foolishly built that power for ourselves once again.